On the Pacific side of South America, I believe we were off the coast of Peru or Chile. Can't quite remember. I was working a night shift, so I was out on the flight deck to watch the sun come up. Strangest damn thing I've ever seen. The ocean was dead calm, like a lake. Seriously, no ripples, no waves, just dead calm. Like you found a small pond in the middle of the mountains that was completely undisturbed. The moon was bright in the sky still, as the sun had not yet begun to rise, but there was still a lot of light from it. The moon made it feel all the more eerie, and besides the noise from the ship, it was completely silent. One of the weirdest experiences I've ever felt. I was caught in an electrical storm while I was fishing. This was on Lake Ontario, running 8-foot graphite rods on downriggers. I was standing on the deck watching the rods, and I noticed blue sparks start jumping from rod to rod. A split second later, lightning struck directly behind the boat. That was probably the loudest natural sound I will ever hear in my life. This story is terrifying and awesome at the same time. I enjoy sailing and like to take long trips on my uncle's boat. We usually try to sail along the east or west coast of the US, but one year he was stationed in Japan and I got the opportunity to travel to Japan. By the way, it's a great place to visit. I was sailing by the coast of Okinawa when a thunderstorm started up in the middle of the night. Strangely, the ocean was completely still and the weather was giving us a wonderful light show. Lightning would strike the water and light up everything around us. Suddenly, lightning struck near our boat, and we saw the most incredible sight: jellyfish. Jellyfish everywhere. Japans were not the usual jellyfish that you see around in the US. These things were huge. The lightning would strike the water, and the jellyfish would light up. The ocean literally looked like it glowed purple and red that night. When I was younger, my dad and I went deep sea fishing all of the time. The creepiest thing that ever happened to me was when we both decided to do a little more surface fishing farther out on the open ocean rather than fish for grouper and whatnot. So I'm sitting with my feet on the edge of the boat and my dad hooks a fish. It seems pretty big based on the way it was pulling, so I look over to see if he needs help. Then, suddenly, something slowly brushes my leg. I look back down, and there was about a 4 to 5 foot barracuda brushing against my legs. I froze, and seconds later, it shot off. When my dad felt the line go slack, he started reeling in faster. The barracuda had bitten off most of the fish. It was only a mouth on a hook, really. It's still pretty freaky to think about. I'm in the US Coast Guard, and I recently was assigned to a ship. I was going through our logbooks to look something up and noticed that on the bridge an unknown blue light was observed beneath the water's surface the night before. This intrigued me, so I started to look through more of the logs. Apparently, every 2 to 3 weeks, they enter lights of varying colors in places you would not usually expect. Some were white, some were red or green lights, and they were usually on the horizon or in the sky, ships or maybe even aircrafts. But they seemed to report colored lights underneath the water as well, sometimes moving around, sometimes stationary. Lights in the sky moving at extreme speeds, then immediately stopping or disappearing altogether, were also a common appearance. Sometimes the lights were visible to the naked eye, but whenever anyone would try to look at them with FLIR or night vision, they were undetectable. I don't know, not that creepy, but it was fairly interesting to me. When I was stationed on the USS Underwood and we were in the Persian Gulf, the water was as flat and still as glass. We were just steaming along, no land anywhere in sight, when suddenly we passed by a sheep bobbing in the water. There wasn't another ship to be seen in any direction, but yet here is the sheep. We all had a pretty good laugh. Nothing particularly specific. I've been sailing all of my life and have somewhere around 6,000 sea miles under my belt, as well as years and years of inland dinghy racing experience. The sea just does strange things sometimes. Wind against tide and underwater obstacles causing weird currents create unnatural waves, and it starts to feel like the sea is just throwing water at you at random. But for me, the worst is fog at sea. At night, fog at sea really fucks up your senses. Everything is quiet and you can't see anything but the boat immediately around you. You keep looking for lights on other ships and listening for foghorns or the sounds of engines in the distance, and your brain starts playing all manner of tricks on you. In a busy shipping lane, it's a serious business, and in a very real way, it could be life or death if you miss a ship and it hits you and you sink. You start to see lights everywhere around you. You start hearing engines creeping up on you. You stop your boat and cut the engine to see if you're hearing anything real, and you enter an even stranger world of sensory deprivation. It's eerie as all hell. Second edit, to add this one, I've just remembered. A full solar eclipse. We saw one in the middle of the English Channel, and it was the strangest thing. There was thin cloud coverage, but the sun was visible through it. We were within the total eclipse zone and could see the shadow coming from miles away. It looked like the biggest, most angry storm I've ever seen. Generally, the darker the clouds are, the more it's going to hurt. This was a darkness as dark as is possible at sea during the day. I talked to my father about it afterwards, and we both felt a real uneasiness getting worse and worse the nearer it got. Our bodies and subconsciouses were readying us for dealing with a really shitty and dangerous situation. It was just like how people sometimes describe seeing a ghost. A cold chill and feeling really on edge. It really was like a ghost storm. A lot of sailing becomes instinctual after a while, and you get a feeling about what's coming from watching the clouds and waves off on the horizon. The eclipse gave off every sign of absolute nastiness, but passed without any real-world effect other than darkness. Really creepy. U.S. Navy submarine sonar tech here. I've heard some strange sounding fish that people can usually identify, or at least have a colloquial name for, such as the Boeing fish. Then I've had a lot of weird, unnatural, disturbing sounding fish that nobody can ever seem to identify. Fish that sound like an opera singer singing while puking into a paper shredder. We also have a guy doing some maintenance on our sonar array while we are underwater. I heard him hit his head and shout, "Oh god damn it, motherfucker." Not creepy, just hilarious. My dad spent years at sea and has many stories from his time on tanker ships as an engineer. One time, the ship was being slowed down by something they couldn't explain. Mechanically, everything was fine, but it turns out they had a large, dead whale wrapped around the bow of the ship, slowing them down. But the creepiest story was a simple one. The crew was shark fishing off the bank of a smaller tanker ship, basically attaching meat chunks to hooks and throwing them off the back of the trawl in the ocean. This was near Southeast Asia or near Australia, I think. My dad, for fun, made up this large hook to use. It might have been steel alloy, but it was described to be very durable. They attach a large chunk of meat to it and throw it off the back. A while later, they haul it back in, only to find the meat is gone and the hook is bent completely straight. There was nothing it could have snagged on in the deep ocean as the boat was driving through. Safe to say, my dad and the crew were sufficiently unnerved. To think that something large down there could just bend a large hook like that, it'd be unnerving to anyone. Former submarine sonarman here. Submarines don't have any windows, so it falls outside the creepy things I've seen requisite. More of a creepy thing we heard, rather. I was stationed on the West Coast, and whenever we would transit near a particular Californian city within a specific area, we would hear over the headphones something that started off sounding like a woman screaming and ended sounding like a bullfrog on a hot summer night. None of the sonar technicians up through our chief knew what the hell to make of it. We chalked it up to just being a merfrog and carried on. Ex-Royal Navy lieutenant here. Back in 2006, the ship I was on, the HMS York, was crossing the Bay of Biscay when we found a single empty survival suit floating around. When it was first spotted, we thought it was a body, but when we put a boat out to check it, it turned out to be completely empty. Probably fell off of a container ship in a storm or something totally normal. Or maybe something else completely spooky, who knows. That was, in and of itself, more or less kind of creepy. But at the same time, not really. I really don't care. We bend it almost immediately. Of course, there's nothing your average sailor likes more than gossip and exaggeration, so within a matter of hours there were rumors sweeping the lower decks that the guys who'd picked it up out of the water found blood, or body parts, or bite marks, or anything else someone could make up. Classic sailor rumor mongering action. A few days later, I had one of the younger and more gullible lads, 17 or 18 years old, in my division, ask to speak with me in private and tell me that he was scared that he'd get eaten by a sea monster if he went overboard. Naturally, I told him we'd do our best to get him out of the water before any of the local wildlife could get a proper hold on him. The job's a good one. Hey guys, it's Gote here. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to the Scary Story episode. The ocean is wide and vast, and it creeps a lot of people out, including me. I have a pretty strong phobia of not being able to see what's below me. I think most people have that, but anyways, if you have any stories of your own, make sure to send me them over my personal email, which I will have linked in the description below. But thank you guys so much, and I'll see you mates in the next episode.